right, folks, Roger Gonzalez here with LocalTheatreNY.tv, and I'm here today with Lenore Skomal, who is the, what are you, Lenore? Executive Director, Artistic Director of the Broadway Bound?
I prefer Queen, but I think we'll go with Festival Director.
Festival Director for the Broadway Bound Theater Festival. If you don't know about the Broadway Bound Theater Festival, it is an amazing festival. It's held at Theater Row. I mean, it's just beautifully done. You've worked on it for quite a few years. This is what, your fourth year? Was supposed to be this summer, is that right?
Yeah, yes, obviously not happening this summer. So yeah, it would have been our fourth year.
Well, let's talk about that for a second. I'm just, as an overview, we know what happened. There's no secret about that. And we know you were scheduled for the summer, which, as we know, is not happening for anyone. So you pushed it back a year. Tell us where you are currently with your scheduling of the festival.
Initially, we postponed it, Roger, till February because Theater Row is anticipatory. They'll be opening in November, last we heard. But as we've gotten closer, we pooled all of our playwrights and asked them, do you feel more comfortable if we just, cancel this year and just go right to August and you'll be the 2021 season? So 201 said, yeah, we'd prefer that. So we decided to pull the trigger and we canceled. So our next, we're basically losing this year, but so is everybody else.
Yeah, it's inevitable. I mean, you really can't work around that. Now, as far as the plays that you had scheduled for this summer, are you keeping a majority of them, or are you starting the whole process again for next year with new submissions? Tell us about that.
Yeah, good question. They've all thrown in. They all want to stay in. So we trimmed down to 14 because we lost a few. It was a hard year for everybody, as we know. And so we did have some matriculation out of the festival. So we will start our submission process again for the remaining slots because we extended our season. We initially shrank it to 3 weeks. Now we're going to extend it to 4 again. And the focus is going to be on Black playwrights. So that kind of dovetails into what we're going to talk about next. So those 6 open slots will be for Black playwrights.
That's really what got my attention. While everyone is responding, as you are, to COVID and the conditions that we're in, you also responded to the issues of race and diversity and inclusion in this country. You created a board, am I right, or a committee? And tell us about that, because I think that's a phenomenal reaction to external conditions.
Well, I think it's the only reaction, quite frankly. And it was actually Emily Goes, who's our social media manager, and myself. She's also an activist, and we're lucky to have her as a team member of the festival because she's really got her claws into this whole movement, as I do now as well. And we started an all artist anti-racist advisory board because obviously, I'm loaded with white privilege, and a lot of my experiences are not reflecting anybody else's. So that being said, we knew we had to have some playwrights and some theater makers on the board who could really help us understand how we can go forward to restructure the festival to better represent underrepresented voices and BIPOC individuals, playwrights, theater makers, up and down the scale. We're talking from, directors to lighting designers, everybody. We've immersed ourselves in really understanding how systematic racism has worked within the theater industry, and we are one industry that has not been spared. We are actually very problematic, and I can only speak to off-Broadway, but I know what's happening on off-Broadway is 10 times worse on Broadway. So, and the statistics are all there to prove it. So this was the first step for us. We had our first meeting on Saturday. So I really think that it's going to be wonderful. It's also a stipend position. I never ask anybody to participate and to help us out because that's unfair, for free or volunteering or whatever. They should be compensated for their time. So it's a year commitment for all our board members, and they are hands-on. A lot of the work that's being done is them just really looking at this and me being open to and sort of checking my white privilege and my defensiveness at the door to realize that things have to change.
Well, I love that. And I think that what makes you unique, you as a company, as a Broadway Theater Festival, is that you're using this time in a way that really few others are doing it. Even in the corporate world, you know, you hear a lot of talk and ads supporting and things like that. But when you mentioned that you had this committee of all artists, I was really, really impressed, because to me, you can't move forward unless you have that hands-on experience, those people that know what needs to be done. So tell us about those people. Tell us about a little bit about the committee, who's in it, you know, anything you want to share.
We have them actually on the on our website as well, but as you know, it's not enough to stand in solidarity. We have to offer allyship. Yes. And we all, you know, and it's saying thank you for the praise, but really no praise and nothing. You know, it's not about me. It's really not even about the festival. It's about changing things at a very basic level. We're a small festival, we know it, but at the end of the day, whatever changes we can make, we're hoping that others may want to emulate, or at least we can get the discussion going. And I figured all I can control is my little corner of this industry. So damn it, I'm going to control it. As to who's on the board, I love everyone on the board, because we have a wonderful disparity in terms of age. We have some very young folks, and we also have older folk like myself. You know, so we run the generational gamut, and we run sort of, it's a good mixture of Black playwrights, Black theater makers, as well as we have a Turkish theater maker, Zeynep Akca, who you may remember, but she was very involved in one of my off-Broadway productions last year as my social media manager. She's also getting her master's in applied theater. And she is an activist and an amazing individual and a director in her own right. Emily Goes, who I've already talked about, our social media manager, but she's so much more than that. She just graduated Tisch School, so she's just fresh out of the system, so has a very interesting perspective on the academic world, you know, which is a whole nother matter, by the way, which we won't get to today. But talk about some problems, right? Chris Phillips, who's our dramaturg, who's a gay playwright, who is one of my right hands in reading all of the plays, understands the festival from the bottom up, since he's been with me for 5 years. And so he's got a voice of reason, also as an activist. Juan Ramirez, and you may remember Juan because Juan was in BBTF our first season, and he's a prolific playwright and director, and also a filmmaker. And he is really dug in because he's very familiar with the Latinx experience within theater in New York City. Nikki Reed, who's new to me, I just met her, but Nikki is also, and she's new to New York City actually, but she's an actress and she's also a director, and she's just amazing individual, real go-getter, has a lot of enthusiasm, and I feel like we're going to be good friends. And also Dominique Rider. They have been a director and a dramaturg based in Brooklyn, and fascinating perspective on work, answering the question, what is a world unmade by slavery? And so, and credentials like as long as your arm, but a fascinating person, interesting person, and really, I'm so happy because it's expanded my understanding of theater just in general. And then finally, Victor Vauban, who is a former circus performer, believe it or not, but is now a dramatist and does a lot of writing, and is performed at Theater for the New City, and has done all of the festivals. So we have this wonderful background there that can speak to festivals in general, which I really wanted our board to also have experience in, since we're a festival. So that's the board as it stands right now. And as I said, we had our first meeting and homework. We have a homework page, and everyone's digging in to sort of figure out how can we take this festival, our festival, and reconstruct it from the bottom up.
I love it. I mean, I absolutely love it. I've been saying things about, how diversity needs to happen in a bigger way in theater for about, a couple of years now. Mm-hmm. And to see this happen is dynamite. I know some of those people on your committee. They're wonderful people, very talented. So let me ask you this. I know it's only your first meeting was just this past week, and you still have a lot of work ahead. You have a whole year before, you do the next festival. What do you hope will come out of these meetings? What kind of message will you be sending to the playwrights that are already involved in the festival, already committed for next year? And what kind of message do you want to send to the playwriting community out there to invite that kind of diversity? Tell us about that.
Well, we really wanted to be very clear, and not just in performative action. We wanted to be very clear that we are anti-racist. It's not a, the word diversity really is sort of useless, just because all of those efforts that everyone, painted as a diversity issue, it doesn't really get to the heart of the matter. It really is about dismantling the system, which is a white supremacist system. And these are words that I have become very comfortable in using over the last 4 months, because I realize now that I understand and I have the blinders off. I feel like I was in a coma, for the last couple of decades.
Yeah.
And I'm not even happy to say that, because it's really distressing to me, because I define myself as a left-wing liberal, and I've really fallen short individually. So this actually is paralleling my own personal growth in this particular area. So as far as the festival is concerned, we have 14 playwrights now, and we're committed to them, and they've been committed to us. What we would like to do, and what we are determined to do, is transition the festival to a BIPOC festival, and to give our stage to underrepresented voices. As I said, and voices, that's even just like, that's a euphemism too. They've been blocked, quite frankly. And as we know, theater sees green. That's the color it sees, but that's no excuse, because it also makes it seem like, they don't see color. Well, they do see color. They also know that the money's coming from white playwrights. And, statistically, if you look at some of the studies that are out there, which we have looked at and we've shared with our committee, because it's actually appalling, but it's the Asian American Performers Action Coalition. They're the ones that do the study every year. You may have be familiar with it, but this past year, they finally did a study of playwrights and directors, not just actors, and how the representation is in terms of all across the board. And most disturbing news is that 89% of all productions in New York City were written by white playwrights. 89%. Now, even more disturbing, as far as I'm concerned, is that our festival falls right into that. We're a microcosm of that, because I sat down and I broke apart every single show. And Roger, you've been with us since the beginning.
Right.
You were around when we conceived this idea of the festival. And I thought, you think about things in your head and you remember it differently. You think, oh, we had so many Black playwrights and so many Latinx playwrights. We didn't. We literally didn't. And I was shocked to see, like, oh crap, 88% of our plays have been by white folk. So that has to change. That has changed. I don't even care what the topic was. So that's what I want to see come out of it. That's what these guys are charged with. It's like, and so everything is up for grabs. We're dismantling, and even the name might be up for grabs. We're really looking at how can we better represent what it is that we want to do, be more in line with our mission.
Right. And I think going back and looking at what you've done is a great place to begin, because sometimes we do get wrapped up in the day-to-day, in the rush to fill in those slots, and the rush to communicate with all those playwrights and put everything together and deal with Theater Row, whatever theater you're working with. And we kind of tend to forget, but if you ingrain it into the fiber of your festival, it kind of begins to form on its own. The message will get out, and I hopefully, help to get the message out with this interview. As far as resistance, do you foresee, or have you gotten any resistance? Because I remember at one point starting a conversation about how from the level of producer to playwright to everyone, there needs to be a greater effort to be inclusive of Black and Hispanic and Asian and all the other groups. And I remember one playwright in particular, not involved in anything you're doing, but just an outside playwright, said to me, well, we're going to go for the most talented. We're not purposely going to pursue anyone of color unless they want to come and they're open to audition. It was sort of a backhanded racism, if you will.
It's called racism, Roger.
Yeah. And so now, have you felt or seen or heard any kind of resistance, or is this something that you feel is really, really going to be accepted and implemented?
I don't care if it's accepted. I'll implement it. So, I don't really listen to anybody else. So yes, I've heard some shocking things come out of people's mouths that are colleagues of mine that happen to be white, or most importantly are white, and I'm appalled. But I have to dismiss it, because those are not the people I listen to. They're the ones that have had the stranglehold on this industry forever. So if you can't find talented Black or people of color that play, I don't care who, playwrights, you're not looking hard enough.
Especially in a place like New York, right?
Especially in New York City. You know, we're not stuck in some little rural town, you know, in the South. We're in an area where we have a plethora of talent. And so all of that being said, we haven't tried hard enough. We don't try hard enough. I mean, we have, you know, consistently reached out to every single playwright group we could find, you know, over the course of the time we've been around. We haven't done enough. So I'm the first to admit it. And we also have to make the festival something that, why should you even be in our festival? That's where this is coming down to, is what are we offering you? If I give you a stage, or we give you a stage and you get to have your show up and you see it up and you love it, where's it going to go after that? Who is going to put your show up in New York City as it's constructed right now? So the larger issue that you're talking about is deconstructing theater in New York City, because it is effed up. And it is exclusionary, and the barriers are so financial, racial, are so high. They're so high. I mean, I did put a show on, as you know, last year, and I had to raise $250,000, and I still didn't have enough, but I did it. And I kept thinking, oh my God, that's me. And I happen to know some folk that would invest. What if I didn't? You know, so we have to change things. And I really think, even if it's just the little festival here, we have to deconstruct the way things are done. We have to offer more. You know, if a playwright is very talented, but doesn't know how to put up a show, or doesn't know the first thing about anything, we have to help teach them. We have to help train. We have to do whatever we need to do with our resources to make sure that they can come along. You know, that's the thing. Because I've heard that argument that you've repeated to me so many times. It makes me want to throw up. I'm like, it's a racist argument.
You mentioned the Asian organization. What was the name?
Asian American Performers Action Coalition.
There's Playwrights of Color on Facebook. There's Hola, which is an organization, you know, which tries to get work for Hispanic actors. What kind of research, or what kind of things are you finding in terms of those organizations? Are there a lot? Is there a need for more?
You can find them, but let me just, a little disclaimer, the Asian American Performers Action Coalition actually does statistics for every breakdown. So they do a valuable service with this report, right? So it's not that they're just, you know, promoting Asian American performers. I mean, obviously, yes, but also they're very good at accurately breaking down, you know, the percentages, which is invaluable information, especially in an industry where we like to think we're colorblind and everything, you know, everyone gets an equal chance and all that silliness. But so that being said, yes, I mean, there are a lot of groups, and hence why we have the committee too, because, you know, Juan Ramirez is very involved in the Latinx community. And so he brings a very different voice, and he also brings in with him all the work that they've done. We're not trying to reinvent the wheel or do all this work and take all this credit. You know, we are standing on the shoulders of Black playwrights, of Latinx playwrights, of people, of transgender playwrights, theater makers. We stand on their shoulders, quite frankly, because there's nothing else that we have to learn. It's all there. And it's really a matter of helping be the conduit to take all of that and to create a festival that really is representative. Not my idea of what is representative, but really truly is. And so that's why from the very beginning, everyone was charged with, forget what we stood for or what we've been. How would you recreate this so that it really does address the need?
As we get to the end of the interview, I just want to ask you a couple of questions which you may not have the answer to because you're beginning the process and you still have a lot of work ahead of you. When will you open up submissions, and how will you approach it differently from, let's say, past submission requests? Tell me a little bit about that so that the folks out there who are playwrights, who are people of color, Black playwrights who want to submit, know how to reach you and how to get their plays in your hands for next summer.
Yeah, well, we started the process with opening. We had one extra slot, you know, the 14 playwrights. Well, we really could fit 15. And so when all this started, when the revolution started and I woke up out of my coma, I realized, holy moly, we should at least, like, let's just open up the festival to a Black playwright, a Black play that is, and we don't charge them anything, as you know, because we are a pay-to-play model, which is another thing we're looking at, because that's part of the white supremacist structure that has ruled not just theater, but also festivals like myself, you know. And so we really, I feel like there's something inherently wrong with that. I always have, but I never could figure out how to change that. That being said, There's one slot that we opened up, that 15th slot. This was before we canceled the festival. So there's been a concerted effort from the team, Emily especially, and Rick, to just sort of really reach out and kind of just state our case. And so we've had 16 submissions for that one slot.
Wow.
Which is great. And so we're thinking of, and again, I'm opening this to the committee decision, so some of this hasn't really been run by them, but we have discussed it generally, is to make the remaining 5 slots for the 2021 festival for just Black playwrights. This is a transition year for us. We cannot call ourselves a BIPOC festival, obviously. We have 14, white presenting playwrights. So we really need to transition into it. And in all fairness, the folks that are already in it, I'm ethically bound and committed to making sure they have the best experience that they can. But I also cannot prevent or stall what has to happen. And all the playwrights are totally on board. They understand, because it's hard enough to get your work up as a playwright, period. But they understand, especially if you're a Black playwright or a playwright of color, it is an insurmountable task. So that being said, we will open up submissions at our usual time, which is December to March, and fill up those remaining slots. The configuration and how it's going to work, I don't know, because that's a work in progress.
Right. One last question, and then, I definitely do want to come back to this conversation at some point later on, because I'd love to see the evolution of this committee and of your work in this area. But how will you communicate or work with the plays that already are in the festival for next year to kind of encourage them or enlighten them to casting, people of color, to maybe rethinking, how they wrote the play, and does that character really have to be white, or does that character, have to be exactly as written? Are they more flexible? How will you do that? Because I think that's a place where you can actually make a strong impact with the existing plays going into next year.
Yeah, that's a really good point, and that is something that we are going to do. One of the great things about the festival that I'm proud of is that we have a very close-knit group, and we have a dedicated Facebook forum page where they interact. Obviously, the last couple of months, it's a little dormant, but we leave everything to them. It's a democratic choice. For instance, whether or not they wanted to cancel or the festival, that was their decision. We told them, you decide. We'll support whatever decision. So that's going to be the conversation we're going to have next with them, is saying, we're in the throes of doing this. They've seen our social media. They see where we're going. So it's like, as a festival, we really need to start putting into action all of this, because that drives me crazy. It drives me crazy, when people talk and talk and talk and they do nothing. And a majority of the theaters are doing nothing. And let's just say that. If I owned a theater, I wish I owned a theater. So that's another decision we have to make too, is like, we want to be with a theater that understands our mission and is going to represent our mission and not stand in the way of it. So as far as our playwrights are concerned, we're going to encourage them. We also, fortunately, because we've been around a while, we know a lot of directors, we know tech people, and so those are things they ask us about. So we also can influence that directly with saying, here, we would love for you to interview these folk.
Again, I'm very enthused about this conversation that we're having today. I hope to share it as widely as possible, because I think what you're doing is what needs to be done. You've recognized it and you're moving forward in the right way. So from my perspective, as someone who comes from a multicultural media background, I see, and worked with many, many Fortune 500 companies that have a multicultural structure, I can tell you that you're doing the right thing. Lenore, I thank you so very much. I know that, you're working very hard, even though, it seems like a downtime, but it really isn't. There's a lot of work to be done, and you're doing it. And so I congratulate you. I congratulate your committee. Bravo to them and bravo to you. Yes. Anything you want to say, last word you want to say out there to playwrights or anybody before we close the interview?
Oh, I wanted to just make sure credit is where credit is due. It's not me, Roger. You know that. It's not me. I have the festival. We started the festival. It's great. It's really everybody that has been working with me on this. And I would be remiss not saying it's all them. And we're doing this. We can't say for the right reason. It's for the only reason. Everybody has human rights, and Black Lives Matter too. So I think we need to not, we have to get off the politics on all this stuff, and we have to look at the humanity of it. And that's what we're all talking about here. So, you know what? No credit is due for me. At the end of the day, if we can accomplish this and we can actually put some wonderful work up on stage that represents this community that has been just tortured and oppressed for so long, I'll feel like I did something very small, to maybe move things forward. That's literally where I'm coming from. But thank you for this platform to do this. The festival thanks you, and as always, you've been a friend to the festival, and I really appreciate that.
Well, thank you. And folks, there will be information on this video as how you can reach Lenore and the Broadway Bound Theater Festival and the folks there. If you're a playwright of color, this is an opportunity that's just amazing. We will be back on stage. We don't know what's happening in the interim, but we will be back on stage. And thank you, Lenore. And this is Roger Gonzalez, LocalTheatreNY.tv. Please share this video.